The afternoon sun beat down on Texas State Highway 287, turning the asphalt into waves of heat that distorted the horizon. Jake Holloway drove his old navy blue Ford pickup truck home after a long day fixing engines at the auto shop where he'd worked for 15 years. His hands still smelled of motor oil, even after washing them 3 times, and his blue uniform was stained with grease. He thought of his 8-year-old daughter, Emma, who would surely be waiting at their neighbor, Mrs. Patterson's house, eager to tell her about her day at school. Being a single father had never been easy, but Jake had done the best he could since his wife had left when Emma was only 2, leaving a letter on the kitchen table and taking only a suitcase with her. Life had become a predictable routine of work, school, dinner, and bedtime stories. Jake didn't complain. Emma was his reason for being, his light on difficult days, and he worked hard to ensure she had everything she needed, even if it meant fixing cars late into the night or working Saturdays. On that particular day, a client had canceled at the last minute, allowing Jake to leave early, something rare and welcome. He already planned to stop at the town's ice cream shop to buy Emma's favorite ice cream, chocolate with cookie pieces, a little surprise to start the weekend. That's when he saw the patrol car pulled over to the side of the road with its hood open. White smoke was escaping from the engine, and a uniformed figure was leaning over it, seemingly trying to diagnose the problem. Jake didn't need to think twice. Even tired, even anxious to get home, he simply couldn't walk past when someone needed mechanical help. It was something that was in his blood, part of who he was. His father, also a mechanic, always said that helping people was the noblest reason to learn a trade. Jake slowed down and parked his pickup truck behind the patrol car, flashing his hazard lights to warn other drivers. He retrieved his toolbox from the back seat, a constant companion, and walked toward the vehicle. The officer was still leaning over the engine, her light brown hair with blonde highlights pulled back in a ponytail, her badge gleaming in the sun. She wore the typical dark green uniform of the Travis County Sheriff's Department, complete with tactical vest and harness on her belt. "Need help?" Jake asked, keeping a respectful distance. He knew officers could be on high alert when caught off guard, especially in vulnerable situations like this. The woman turned quickly, her hand instinctively reaching for her holstered weapon, before relaxing at the sight of Jake in his mechanic's uniform and toolbox. Her face was etched with a mixture of frustration and relief. "The engine overheated out of nowhere," she explained, wiping her hands on a cloth. "I already called a tow truck, but they said it will take at least an hour. I was trying to see if I could at least figure out what happened." Her voice had a professional tone, but Jake could detect the weariness behind her words. "I'm a mechanic. Let me take a look." Jake approached and began examining the engine with experienced eyes. While checking fluid levels and inspecting hoses, he chatted casually, explaining what he was doing. The officer watched attentively, asking intelligent questions about how the engine worked. Jake noticed she seemed genuinely interested, not just politely tolerant like many customers were. It was while he was checking the radiator that something strange happened. The officer moved to give Jake more space, and the sunlight hit his face directly from a different angle. Jake looked up at that moment, intending to ask her to hold a flashlight, but his words died on his lips. His eyes met hers, and it was as if the whole world had stopped spinning for an instant. Those eyes, those same gray-green eyes he hadn't seen in almost 10 years. Eyes he was sure he'd never see again in his life. Eyes that belonged to a face he thought he'd forgotten, but which he now realized was merely buried deep in his memory. Sarah? The name came out as a whisper, almost inaudible, laden with a decade of repressed emotions. The officer froze, her expression shifting from confusion to shock, and then to something that seemed a mixture of panic and recognition. Her hands trembled slightly before she crossed them over her chest, as if she needed to physically protect herself from the moment. "Jake?" Her voice was as low as his had been. "Jake Holloway." The silence that followed was deafening, filled only by the distant sound of traffic and the buzzing of insects in the afternoon heat. Jake felt his heart race, beating so hard he was sure she could hear it. His hands still held a wrench, but he had completely forgotten what he was doing with it. Memories flooded his mind like a dam that had finally given way after years of holding back the waters. University of Houston, spring 10 years ago. Jake was a 22-year-old in his final year of a technical course in automotive mechanics, working part-time in a garage to pay his bills. Sarah was a sophomore in forensics, dreaming of becoming a criminal investigator. They met at an intercourse party, one of those noisy nights where the music was too loud and there were too many people. Jake didn't usually attend these kinds of events, preferring the silence of the garage, but his roommate had insisted. Sarah was in the corner of the room, slightly apart from the crowd, holding a glass of soda and observing the people with clinical interest, as if she were studying human behavior for a class. Jake had been drawn to her immediately, not only by her natural beauty, but by the way she seemed both present and distant at the same time, as if she were at the event, but not completely part of it. He had gathered courage, something rare for him, and approached her with a terrible joke about thermodynamics that made her laugh. That laugh. He still remembered that laugh. It was genuine, unaffected, the kind of sound that made other people want to smile too. They talked all night, discovering unlikely affinities. She told stories about fascinating criminal cases she had studied, and he explained the mechanical beauty of a well-tuned engine. To their surprise, they didn't find each other's subject boring. On the contrary, there was something captivating in the passion with which each spoke about their field. What began that night blossomed into an intense and complicated relationship that lasted nearly a year. They were young, passionate, and completely different in almost every aspect. Jake was practical and down to earth, finding satisfaction in fixing tangible things. Sarah was intense and ambitious, always planning the next 10 steps of her career. He dreamed of a simple life, perhaps opening his own workshop in a small town. She talked about moving to large urban centers, maybe even working for the FBI. The differences eventually became too much. They argued about the future, about priorities, about what really mattered in life. The final argument took place on a rainy April night in the living room of Jake's tiny apartment. Sarah had received an internship offer in Dallas, an incredible opportunity that could open doors for her career. Jake had just accepted a permanent position at the workshop where he worked in Houston, a stable job with good benefits. "You could come with me," Sarah had said, her words more of a plea than a suggestion. "Dallas has workshops. You could find work there, and you could stay here," Jake had replied, the frustration evident in his voice. "Do the internship here in Houston. It doesn't have to be Dallas." But they both knew it wasn't that simple. It wasn't just about the city. It was about who they fundamentally were, about what they wanted from life. Sarah needed to pursue her dreams with everything she had, and Jake needed stability and roots. Neither was wrong, but they also couldn't find a middle ground. They broke up that night. Sarah left for Dallas 2 weeks later. Jake helped her load the boxes into the moving van. A silent and painful moment where they both wanted to say something, anything, that could mend what was broken between them, but the words wouldn't come. She got into the van, waved one last time, and disappeared into the night. Jake stood in the parking lot for an hour after she left, staring at the empty space where the van had been, feeling as if a part of himself had gone with her. In the following months, Jake tried to move on. He threw himself into work, taking extra shifts, studying for advanced certifications. That's when he met Rebecca, a waitress at a restaurant near the workshop. Rebecca was sweet and caring, but Jake knew, even when he proposed a year later, that part of his heart still belonged to someone he had let go of. He thought time would heal that he would learn to love completely again. When Emma was born, he felt he had finally arrived, that his life was complete, and the past was truly the past. But Rebecca sensed it. She never said anything directly, but Jake saw it in her eyes, especially in quiet moments when she thought he wasn't looking. She knew she was competing with a memory, a ghost of a love Jake had experienced when he was young, and that somehow he had never fully overcome. When Emma turned 2, Rebecca finally admitted she couldn't take it anymore. She wanted to be loved completely, not just adequately. Jake couldn't disagree. She deserved that, just as he deserved honesty with himself about feelings he had never truly processed. Now, 10 years after that rainy night in April, Jake stood on the side of a Texas highway, looking into the same eyes that haunted his occasional dreams, belonging to a face that had matured, but remained unmistakably the same. "Are you all right?" Sarah finally broke the silence, her professional voice returning like a shield. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I kind of saw it," Jake replied, forcing himself to move again, to act as if his foundations hadn't just crumbled. "Sorry, it's just, how old are you? 9? 10? 10? Sarah confirmed quickly as if she had counted. 10 years next week, actually. The fact that she knew the exact date told Jake that he wasn't the only one who carried those memories. They stood there, 2 strangers who had once been close, separated by a decade of lived experiences and Choices made, connected by an overheated car hood, and the impossible chance of an encounter on an empty road. Jake cleared his throat, trying to regain some semblance of normalcy. "The problem is the water pump," he said, turning his attention forcibly to the engine. Though his hands weren't as steady as before, "It's completely failed. It needs to be replaced. It's not something I can fix here on the road." "I understand," Sarah replied, maintaining a physical distance that seemed to mirror the emotional distance they were both desperate to keep. "Thank you for taking a look. I really appreciate it." The formality between them was almost comical, considering they once knew each other's deepest thoughts, secret fears, and impossible dreams. Jake slammed the hood shut harder than necessary, the metallic sound echoing like a period at the end of an unfinished sentence. "You did it," Jake said suddenly, the words spilling out before he could stop them. "A career in law enforcement. You really did it." Sarah glanced at the badge on her uniform, then back at Jake, and for the first time a small smile touched her lips. "Yes, I worked in Dallas for 7 years, then moved to Austin 3 years ago when I got a position in the county, crime investigator eventually. It is everything I dreamed of." But there was something in her voice, a slight hesitation, that suggested that perhaps everything she dreamed of wasn't entirely as fulfilling as she once imagined it would. "And you?" Sarah asked, crossing her arms in a way Jake recognized as her defensive gesture. "Still fixing cars?" "Still fixing cars," Jake confirmed with a nod. "Supervisor now, actually. Same shop in Houston for 15 years. He hesitated, then decided there was no reason to hide it. "I have a daughter, Emma. She's 8 years old." He watched something cross Sarah's face, a complex emotion that could be surprise, sadness, or perhaps a combination of both. 8 years. Wow. Congratulations, Jake. Seriously. "I'm a single father," Jake added, not knowing exactly why he felt the need to clarify this. "My wife left when Emma was 2. It's just the 2 of us now." Sarah was silent for a moment, processing the information. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, her professional armor lowering slightly. "That must be difficult, working full-time and taking care of a child alone." "It has its moments," Jake admitted with a small smile. "But she's worth every difficult second. She's smart, funny, incredibly kind. Best thing that ever happened to me." And as he said this, Jake realized it was absolutely true. Emma had saved him from drowning in bitterness after the divorce. She had given his life a purpose that went beyond himself. The sound of an approaching engine interrupted the moment. The tow truck finally arrived, a large yellow truck with flashing lights. The driver, a burly man with a prominent belly and a worn baseball cap, climbed out of the cab and assessed the situation with experienced eyes. "Water pump?" he asked Jake, recognizing a fellow mechanic by his uniform. "Water pump," Jake confirmed. "Complete failure." While the tow truck driver prepared the patrol car to be towed, Jake and Sarah stood there in an uncomfortable silence, both searching for words that could capture the absurd strangeness of the moment. Jake glanced at his watch and realized he was already 40 minutes late. Emma was starting to worry. "I need to go," he said, grabbing his toolbox. "My daughter is waiting." He hesitated, then pulled a pen from his pocket and scribbled a number on his palm, something he never did, but which felt right at that moment. "Here, my number. If you need a reliable mechanic or just, I don't know." He felt stupid, like a nervous teenager, not like a 32-year-old man. Sarah looked at the number, then at Jake, and something indecipherable passed before her eyes. She picked up her own phone and dialed the number, her hands moving with the trained efficiency of someone accustomed to quickly documenting information. "Thank you, Jake, for helping with the car and for stopping." She put her phone away, and for a moment it seemed she was going to say something more, but she simply nodded, a small gesture that carried the weight of everything left unsaid. Jake returned to his pickup truck, placed the toolbox in the back seat, and started the engine. As he drove away, he glanced in the rear view mirror and saw Sarah still standing there, watching him leave, and it was as if time had looped strangely, echoing that night 10 years ago when he watched her leave. Only this time, it was he who was leaving, and there was something different about the farewell, something unfinished that hung in the air like an unanswered question. The rest of the drive home passed in a blur. Jake drove on autopilot, his mind teeming with memories he had kept carefully locked away for so long. When he finally arrived at Mrs. Patterson's house, Emma rushed out the door as she always did, her face lighting up with pure joy at the sight of her father. She had her mother's brown eyes, but Jake's smile, and in that moment, as she leaped into his arms, Jake felt reality reassert itself. This was his life, this incredible child, these responsibilities, this routine he had built from scratch after everything had fallen apart. Dad, you forgot, Emma said as he carried her to the pickup truck. You said you'd be home early today. Sorry, honey. I stopped to help someone on the road. A car broke down. Jake placed Emma in the back seat and fastened her seatbelt, his movements automatic after years of practice. You always stop to help, Emma observed with the simple wisdom of childhood. Teacher Miller says that makes you a good Samaritan, like in the Bible story she told. Jake smiled, kissing the top of her head. Professor Miller is right. We always help when we can, right? That night, after Emma finally fell asleep following 3 stories and 2 glasses of water, Jake sat on the back porch of his small house, a forgotten beer in his hand, gazing at the stars and thinking about destiny, choices, and the strange paths life takes. He thought about Sarah, who she had become, the badge she wore with evident pride. She had achieved her dreams, just as she said she would. And him? He looked through the window into Emma's room, where a nightlight cast soft shadows on the walls, decorated with drawings she had made at school. Perhaps he didn't have a brilliant career or great achievements to show for it, but he had this. He had a daughter who loved him unconditionally, who trusted him completely, who knew he would always be there when she needed him. He had an honest job that comfortably supported them both. He had caring neighbors, like Mrs. Patterson, who never accepted payment for looking after Emma, but always accepted the free repairs Jake did on her car. He had a good life, different from what he had imagined when he was 22, but good nonetheless. 3 days passed. Jake hadn't expected to hear from Sarah again, assuming the encounter had been just that, a brief crossing of paths that had once been intertwined. Then, one Thursday night, as he was helping Emma with her math homework at the kitchen table, his phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. Hi, Jake. It's Sarah. Sorry for taking so long to write. I was thinking, if you have time, maybe we could grab a coffee. Catch up? No pressure if you don't want to. I'd understand. Jake read the message 3 times, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. Emma looked up from her multiplying problems, noticing the change in her father's expression with the unsettling intuition that children possess. What is it, Dad? Nothing, love. Just a work message. Jake lied softly, immediately feeling guilty about it. He didn't lie to Emma. He made a point of it. But how? Could he explain something he didn't even fully understand himself? He looked at the message again, his thumbs hovering over the keyboard. Part of him wanted to simply ignore it, leave the past in the past where it belonged. But another part, a part he thought he had silenced years ago, wanted answers. It wanted closure. Or maybe it just wanted to see her again, understand who she had become, share who he had become. He typed a reply. Coffee would be nice. Saturday morning? I know a good place. He sent it before he could change his mind. Sarah's reply came almost immediately. Saturday works perfectly. Send me the address. Saturday dawned clear and warm, typical of Texas in any season. Jake took Emma to spend the day with her best friend, whose parents kindly offered to take her to the water park, an activity that would keep the girls busy and happy for hours. This gave Jake the morning free, something rare and somewhat disconcerting in his normally structured existence. He arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early, a habit Rebecca often said was both charming and irritating. It was a small, cozy place he frequented occasionally, with exposed brick walls and local art hanging in simple frames. Jake grabbed a table near the window and ordered a black coffee, watching the people pass by on the sidewalk while trying to calm the nerves that throbbed beneath his skin. Sarah arrived right on time, and Jake saw her through the window before she went inside. She was, wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt, her hair loose over her shoulders, without her uniform, and all the equipment that came with it. She looked younger this way, closer to the girl he had known at university, and Jake felt his stomach clench with something that wasn't exactly nostalgia, but something more complicated. Hi, she said, sliding into the chair opposite him, and there was a nervousness in her too, a vulnerability that the uniform had hidden on the road. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I wasn't sure if you'd want to. Honestly, me neither, Jake admitted with a small smile. But here we are. They ordered, Sarah choosing a cappuccino and a blueberry muffin, and for a few minutes they engaged in small talk about the weather, the traffic, the little irritations of everyday life. It was safe, neutral, and completely unsatisfying. It was Sarah who finally delved deeper. "Jake, I need to say something. Since that day on the road, I haven't been able to stop thinking about how we ended things, about the things I said and didn't say. I was selfish. I was so focused on what I wanted, on my career, that I didn't really consider what would be right for us. I'm not saying we should have stayed together. That's not it. But I should have been kinder about how we ended things. You deserved that." Jake was quiet for a moment, absorbing the words. "We were young," he finally said. "We were both just trying to figure out who we were. You weren't selfish for pursuing your dreams. Sarah, you were honest, and I appreciated that, even when it hurt." He stirred his coffee, watching the swirls of the dark liquid. "If I'm being honest, I wasn't entirely sure back then either. Part of me clung to you because I was afraid of change, afraid that if I let you go, I'd never find that again. And I was right, in a way. I didn't. But I learned that sometimes you don't have to. Sometimes you have something different that's equally valuable in ways you didn't expect." Sarah nodded. Slowly. "Emma," she said softly, "you mentioned you're a single father. That must have been difficult." "It was and is," Jake agreed. "But she taught me so much. About what really matters. About unconditional love. About being present." He looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and saw the fine lines around her eyes that weren't there 10 years ago. The marks of sleepless nights, and difficult affairs, and a life lived intensely. "And you? Are you happy? Truly happy with what you've built?" The question caught her off guard. Jake could see. Sarah lowered her gaze to her cappuccino, and when she spoke, there was a raw honesty in her voice. "Most days, yes. I love my job. I love making a difference, solving cases, bringing justice. But there are times, usually late at night when I come back to an empty apartment after a particularly difficult case, when I wonder if I pursued the wrong thing, or not wrong, but perhaps incomplete. I built this incredible career, but somewhere along the way, I forgot to build a life around it." She looked up, her eyes meeting his. "Seeing you with your daughter, the way you talk about her, there's a contentment in you that I don't know if I'll ever reach." "You still can," Jake said gently. "You're 32, Sarah, not 80. There's still time for everything you want." They talked for hours, losing track of time as years of separate experiences poured between them. Sarah recounted cases that haunted her, victims she still thought about even years later. Jake shared stories about Emma, about the struggles of being a single father, about finding joy in small everyday victories. There was an ease in the conversation that surprised them both, as if 10 years hadn't passed, as if they were simply picking up where they left off, but with the wisdom and scars of a life lived informing every word. When they finally left the coffee shop, the sun was high and morning had turned into afternoon. They stood in the parking lot, both reluctant to end their date, but unsure how to naturally prolong it. "That was nice," Sarah said, smiling genuinely for the first time since they had reunited. "Really nice. Thank you for sharing your morning with me." "It was good for me too," Jake agreed. He hesitated, then said, "Look, I don't know what this is or what it should be, but I'd like to stay in touch if you want. As friends. No pressure, no expectations, just two people who cared once and can care again, in a different way." Sarah nodded, something softening in her expression. "I'd like that, very much." She leaned closer and hugged him, a quick but sincere hug, and Jake returned it, feeling something settle inside him. A piece he didn't know was missing, finally finding its place. They parted with promises of texts and maybe another coffee, and Jake drove to pick up Emma feeling lighter than he had in years. He didn't know what the future held, whether he and Sarah would truly build a friendship, or if this was simply the closure they both needed. But for the first time since that rainy night 10 years ago, he wasn't looking back with regret anymore. He was looking forward, curious and open to whatever might come, his heart finally free from the weight of unanswered questions and lost possibilities. Emma greeted him with excited stories about water slides and new diving records, and Jake listened attentively, grateful for this life, this moment, this second, another chance to make peace not only with another person but with yourself.